All right, we'll go ahead and get started. I'll introduce myself. I'm Misty Good. I'm the Division Chief of Neonatology at UNC Chapel Hill, and I'm moderating with Dr. David McCauley. Go ahead.
I'm David McCauley. I'm an associate professor of pediatrics and neonatology at the University of California in San Diego. I'm a physician scientist and study genetic and developmental mechanisms of diaphragmatic hernia. Want me to give like a welcome for this session?
Yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Okay. Just to welcome everybody to this session. We're having a series of cafes or virtual meetings where we're trying to give some general career advice for people who are in training or early faculty positions who are interested in basic science-oriented research or physician scientist career tracks. The purpose of these meetings is basically to help give some general guidance to address common issues that are major barriers that we think are important to consider in this career path, and to give you, the trainees, the opportunity to interact with some nationally recognized experts who have really good ideas about how to address those barriers. So the barrier that we were hoping to focus on today is mainly around the issue of mentorship. I think a lot of programs spend a lot of time focused on how to select a mentor that's going to help you start on your career path, but it's more than just selecting a single mentor. For me personally, I've had to have a group of mentors that I've developed over time and that I use variably depending on what the issue is that I'm trying to address or what I'm trying to work on. So rather than really only focusing on having a single mentor and just identifying that mentor, it's also about how do you develop a group of mentors and not only identify them and initiate a mentor-mentee relationship with them, but how do you maintain that relationship with them and then actually use it in a way that's efficient. I think a lot of trainees are really focused on just trying to find somebody who's going to be their mentor, but then only later do you start to recognize how do you actually use that mentoring relationship to your benefit, and how do you, nurture that mentorship relationship and have it change over time depending on your career stage or whatever issue it is that you're having. Is that helpful, the way to start it?
That's perfect.
Okay.
We are joined by an amazing group of panelists. And so I'll go ahead and introduce the panelists. And then what we'll do is we'll go through each panelist and we'll have them just give their unique perspectives on the topic of mentorship and mentorship teams. And then we'll open it up, for discussion and any other pearls of wisdom that the group can provide. So I'll start. We're going to go in alphabetical order. So I'll start with Dr. Jill Marin, who's the Division Chief of Neonatology at Brown. Dr. Cami Martin, who's the Division Chief of Neonatology at Cornell. Dr. Steve McElroy, who's the Division Chief of Neonatology at UC Davis. Dr. Sarah Taylor, who's the Division Chief of Neonatology at Yale, and then Dr. Jim Wynn, who's Professor of Neonatology at the University of Florida. All of them are phenomenal physician scientists and really leaders in the field, and we're just so honored to have them here to talk about this very important topic. And we will open it up to the panelists. Dr. Marin, do you want to get us started?
Oh, sure. Thanks. I think all of us will offer some unique pearls about, one, identifying a mentor, and as David said, growing with that mentor. For me, it was really important to have a mentor that, one, I knew could devote enough time to me. I think that I may have to have Dr. Cami Martin go because I have a dog issue. So Cami, you take it and I'll take over.
Okay, that sounds great. I think for me, two things. One is, if I had to reevaluate my own mentored relationship when I realized that I perhaps wasn't at a point where I wanted to be at my certain stage of my career. So I think, always constantly reappraise what your goals are, what your professional goals are, and whether you're meeting them. And if you're not, where that might be, and are you getting enough from your mentor or / mentors in developing that team? So I went through a period where I kind of reappraised that and realized that I did need something a little bit different. I think the other thing that I realized that it was a difference between maybe across mentored experiences is I got the most out of it when I created value. And what I mean by that is identifying somebody and having a project, having a pathway of investigation where you're both going to get value from it. And when that happened and I was able to create that, I realized then we both made time. We both structured sort of our day and our mentorship and mentee goals so that it benefited both of us. So I created value such that my mentor wanted to incorporate me more and more into the overall operations of the lab, making sure that what I accomplished, because that helped him accomplish what he did, and vice versa. So think about what that is and how you identify and how you create value in each other. And I think that's where you get the time that Jill was about to just say. I would say the third thing, because there's lots of things, and I'm sure we'll come to the discussion. The most important thing is that as I get older, I realize that mentoring is very selfless, right? And it's a lot of time, and everybody's, trying to balance their time. So help them help you. And so, and in doing so, make it clear what your goals are, what maybe timelines you're going after, how they can best help you, but also be available when they're available. And, in a common story or a story I tell a lot about that initial transition of my mentorship and making sure I was available when they were free was the only time we can come into a common sort of free time was about 6:30 in the morning. And I lived at the time about an hour away or so from Boston. But I realized, hey, if I'm going to now make this work and create value and get that time that I need, fine. So I got out of the house and got ready. So I was there. So first thing in the day, we can meet. And then again, as that relationship matured, all of a sudden time started opening up later in the day, a little bit more reasonable because that value is being created along the way. So create value, respect that time of your mentor, make yourself available, and help them help you by being very specific about your career goals and plans.
Thank you. Dr. Marin, do you want to?
Yeah, we'll sneak back in. Yeah, thanks, Cami. I was going to that point about finding the time and making sure the mentor has the time. I also think one of the areas that is so important is to grow with your mentor. And Cami alluded to this about value, but also having a mentor and working with that mentor to define your own unique career path that isn't just in the shadow of the existing mentor. I think that's a really important point as you mature through the process. And the best mentors want you to do that. They really want you to define that. But it all comes back to what Cami was alluding to, which is about helping the mentor along that course. So really developing your own thoughts, your own areas of discovery you want to go with, and presenting that to them so that you can develop your own course. And the best mentorship relationships, I think, ultimately evolve over time to one of sponsorship, of being colleagues and collaborators. And I think I've been very fortunate to watch that evolve over time as I became not just the mentee, but started to take on my own mentors, and fortunate to have those that train me, put me now forward in a very positive way. But it all comes back to you realizing that's your goal and taking the initiative to do so. So I'll stop there.
Very good. Dr. McElroy, your thoughts?
So you guys will see very similar streams, I think, through everybody's things. So I'm gonna kind of go along with what my esteemed colleagues have already said. Mentorship is probably the most important thing for your success as a young person. You have to have a good scientific question, and you have to have motivation and drive, but the mentor makes or breaks you. And so it's super important to find the right mentor and take your time doing it. Don't just take the first person that's shot to you. The other thing that goes along with what Jill and Cami both said is mentorship is it's not a for you thing. It's a relationship. If it's not a relationship, then it's an advisor. And advisors are fine. They help you tell you what to do, but they're not invested in you in the same way. A mentorship is a relationship, and it has to go both ways, and there has to be trust both ways. So Cami's example of her mentor creating time for her later was because there was a benefit both ways, but also because of a trust thing. And so you have to have that. You have to put the time in, and you have to make it work. And that is critical. If you do it well and you do it right, then the mentor stays with you forever. And regardless of where you go, regardless of where your mentor goes, those things still happen. And the reality is that the field of academic neonatology is really small, and especially in scientific lanes. And so you will keep bumping into people that you meet through your mentor all throughout your career. And so these things are relationships that are really important to foster and maintain.
Thank you, Steve. Sarah, do you want to go next?
Sure. So hi, everyone. I'm just, of course, adding on because I agree with everything that has been said by people who have really lived this as well. Going back a little, I guess, backwards is choosing the mentor. There are people who are fantastic, phenomenal scientists who are not great mentors. And so really making sure as you're talking to people who feel that scientific connection, you feel like the science they're doing, that their lab would be the place for you, make sure that there's also a good personality connection, as well as that they have a track record of mentoring. There are great scientists out there who do not have that track record, and maybe you will be the first on their track, and you can have that relationship with someone who hasn't quite gotten there before as a mentor, but just be very mindful of that. And then the other point I would add is a good mentor is looking at both your science and moving the progress of your science and the progress of your career and your path to independence. And so when I'm mentoring, I am, we have a meeting together, really try to include both of those goals in the meeting. Maybe not every meeting, but make sure that we're keeping an eye out on that. And then I just will echo what has been said is being mentored is very active. Lots of energy. You think of a mentor as a guide, and perhaps you're waiting for them to guide you, but for this to really work, it really is the mentee who's taking the initiation so much of the time.
Thank you. These ideas are building on each other. They are really great. Jim, do you want to go last, I think?
Sure. Yeah, I don't really have much to add in the spirit of NIH review. I agree with reviewers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think the thing that wasn't mentioned, though, is that today mentorship is, particularly if you're not at the bench, is possible through what we're doing right now. And I think that you can find tremendous talent anywhere in the world. And it's a great time to be able to interact with people all over the globe through media like this. So part of your mentorship may be a concrete person who's right there, and that's great. But your mentorship doesn't need to be geographically close. That's the only thing that I would add.
That's great. Well, we definitely want this to be interactive. And so we wanted to see from the group if you guys have questions and any mentorship topics or any concerns about mentorship, anything at all. I don't want to call on you guys, but
Hey, before we open it up, Misty, I did have one other thing that I thought of.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I kind of learned the hard way. As a mentee, you need to be organized with your mentor. And when I started off, I didn't really appreciate, I knew my mentors were busy, but I didn't really appreciate how busy they were. And so I just kind of showed up. And as I went through, I learned that I would be more effective as a mentee and I'd get more out of the meeting if I came with an agenda. And I came with an agenda that said, hey, this is what we talked about last time. These are the things I was supposed to do. These are the things that I'm moving forward on. These are what I need your help with. And that has turned out to be a really important thing moving forward. I actually try and do that with my mentees now too. But for the people that are in the mentee realm, that I have found has been a critical way to help make the relationship work better.
And to build on that, I think that's an excellent point, Steve. And I think also just to be in a habit of doing that with yourself and also in your own milestones, because when you're young, I don't think you realize just how time does fly. And how when doing research, there's a lot of time where you're building the methods and you're trying to get that data and you're waiting for maybe a next opportunity for a poster or something. But before you realize it, as you move from fellowship to junior faculty, you could be timing out on important awards, important early career development opportunities. So keeping yourself to that timeline, but also sharing that with the mentor will make sure, again, that you're chipping away and you're not saying, oh, I'll do that next month. They're waiting. Before you know it, 6 months, 9 months is down the road and you haven't made progress in those. So that purposeful planning around very specific targets and timelines will help both of you.
That's great. I guess, but since we're talking about mentoring up, what's all your mentoring up advice? Coming prepared to the meetings, but what else?
I love when the mentees are sharing papers they find interesting, awards, or saying, hey, do you think I could go for this? That's incredibly helpful. It helps me keep up to date with where their mind is, where their work is. When I find mentees do that, we find funds, which is fantastic. And it may be, a small awards here and there, but it's a wonderful way to make sure that we're able to do more by having those funding sources. So I think knowing your mentor may not read everything, and you might say, oh, did you read that paper I sent you last week? No, I didn't get to it. But I still appreciate that sharing, where I can follow that direction.
I would just add, make sure those meetings are on the books. Don't leave that up for chance. You should be meeting at least every other week with your mentor, if not every week. Make sure it's there. And the other piece of mentoring advice mentoree advice I would give is a Friday afternoon is a great day for your week to end. But if you hand your mentor something that's due Monday, you've just ruined their weekend. Always keep that in mind. I think that's this common thing where you feel that's great. I got it off my desk on a Friday. Be really cognizant. It's going to go a long way when you buffer your mentor because they're tired and overworked too. And so you may be looking at a great weekend, but they're now not. And so just that type of thoughtfulness is really helpful to all of us. And sometimes it doesn't work out and we get that because the data just came in and everyone's working hard. We get it. But giving your mentor the needed time without ruining their breaks or a little bit of downtime is helpful.
Jim, anything to add?
Not really. No, I mean, I think just it's simple. Show up, work hard, be nice. I mean, we can make it last, as long as the questions come. But I think if your expectation is that there's someone who's just waiting to serve, I mean, we're all trying to do the same thing that you're trying to achieve. We're just doing it at a different level, and it is hard. And so I definitely want to help people and inspire them. But I'm not waiting on a block of ice for work to do. So I think just showing up and wanting to do it for yourself, then, like everybody said, it's a lot more inspiring. And I'm willing to lose some personal time because somebody's enthusiastic and is ready to learn and is taking off on something that's contagious. And so it's just a matter of sometimes you feel like you just have to strike someone to, go make a table of the things you want in table 1, and that it takes 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks for them to come back, and they might want to return on that in a day. And that's I think where people are going with this. Just what it would be like if you were that mentor and I came to you and I had that same level of enthusiasm. Would you be ready to give up some time for yourself? Or do you see that as a mentor's responsibility? Because this is not a paid activity. It's pure pleasure. And it's great. Totally worth it. Except when it's not.
I would build on that, finding that enthusiasm, coming in with enthusiasm. Absolutely. It's contagious, right? You get drawn to that and you want to be a part of that enthusiastic relationship. And I think part of that is what Sarah was talking about a little bit, and that is read the literature. What is really interesting to you? I find it most difficult when someone will come and say they want to do research, great, but yet maybe unsure what, or haven't thought about what drives them, the questions that they're thinking about every day. What I had one mentor ask, what do you get angry about? What angers you? And I'm like, well, I don't know, and what he was trying to get at is, what do you see every day that you just don't understand, and you're driven to just either understand it, to change it, because that is going to bring you back every day and back every day. And that's the enthusiasm that you'll start to have, and the passion for the project, and your mentor will see it, and it will be a nice collective, sort of approaching getting after that. So when you come to this person, you're trying to find, what it may be that you want to do. Yes, it's important to understand what resources, their capacity, what questions they're looking at, but come to the table with some already understanding of what drove you to even do this job? What drove you to do this fellowship? What is now every day on the wards in the NICU that you're saying, I really want to be a part of that solution, and bring those ideas, and then they can help cultivate from there. I don't want someone doing something because I'm doing it. I want someone doing something because they love it and want to do it.
Yeah, I'll just add on to that, Cami. That is so well said, and that going to the literature, you want to be knowledgeable, and that really helps you develop your path of independence, because your mentor is doing it their way. They've developed their system, they developed their approach, they developed who they are as a researcher. If you are getting that fantastic foundation in the literature, you're reading what others are doing, it's a perfect way to bring another aspect to that lab, to that research group. And the more you have that basis, that foundation to build on, it really opens avenues of study and innovation. And then that adds the value. You're bringing something your mentor has not maybe kept up with a different lab that really interests you. You're bringing that information to them, and then you're going to collaboratively build off of that. So that's going back to the literature. I think I often do that when I'm stuck in my own career, and it's a great way to start to build those habits.
Can I ask you guys if you use a general kind of approach to help orient your mentees to the mentor-mentoring relationship? I've had some colleagues who use a contract that any new mentee will review with you, just that tries to point out all the different aspects about the mentor-mentee relationship that should be addressed, or you guys should be thinking about when entering the relationship, and then revisit it periodically? Or do you maintain any kind of organized document to make sure that you don't get too focused on only addressing like this experiment that you've been trying to troubleshoot? You're also, covering the career development topics that you've addressed. And Betty is one of my mentees, and I can feel myself when I'm talking to her kind of shifting through the gears, like I'm focusing on a talk she's about to give, but I also know she's got these other things coming up, and that I need to be thinking about, okay, did we plan ahead enough about a grant application or anything like that? Is there some kind of an organized system that you maintain, or you maintain in a partnership with your mentee?
I don't, but now I wish I did, David, because I think that sounds brilliant.
Yeah, no, I agree. And maybe that could be part of, right, the deliverable of this is, can we share those resources to organize and structure that mentor-mentee relationship? I know before I came here to New York, I was part of the grant review and support program at Harvard, and we developed, it was sort of to assist in that K to R transition, but part of that was building out these kind of tools, and one was the mentor-mentee relationship. And it was interesting because when we first started to roll it out, people were nervous. They were nervous to go to their mentor and talk about expectations from them. And so they did not want to bring that up. They were nervous. They were afraid it was going to be hostile. And so we talked about sort of the spirit of it. And then instead, what we got back was tremendous feedback, both from the mentee and the mentor, because as Jill said, it said very clearly, I would love to review your output. Please give me X number of days, you know? And so those conversations that it's nice to have up front actually just laid a groundwork of a really nice bilateral relationship. So I can understand where it feels or may feel uncomfortable, but it's a really nice process to go through on both sides. And it just like sets the groundwork. And I'm happy to grab what that looks like and offer that as a template if we don't have those already from the panel here.
Hi, is it okay if I ask a quick question?
Yes, I saw you come off mute. Thank you, Sean.
First, Sean, say where you're from.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Sean. I'm a third-year fellow at Weill Cornell, and I am thankfully going to be staying on as a junior faculty. So very excited to be here. But I actually had two questions. One, as far as like maintaining mentor relationships, and I'll say, Dr. Martin, just upfront that this is not a real life example, more of a thought in the future. Any recommendations as you kind of grow your team? You know, the more people, more cooks are in the kitchen, I feel like there's more inevitability for potential conflicts or different perspectives. In your experiences, what has been as the mentee? What is your advice, experience when you kind of approach those disagreements, maybe between your senior mentors, and kind of how you resolve those differences? And then I know that that's like a big topic, but then the other thing I wanted to ask was, as someone transitioning from, you know, training to more of a attending position, the concept of like kind of starting your own mentorship, going from being a mentee to mentor, as a very early career junior faculty, like when did you feel like it was kind of time to start building that and like reaching out to make yourself available as a mentor? Because I feel like I worry about like, I feel like I don't necessarily know what I'm doing yet. You know, I'm still getting my feet wet and kind of learning when am I ready to kind of take on the role of a mentor?
I think those are both wonderful, wonderful questions. I'll put my 2 cents in and then we'll go around and share. So I think the first question you asked, Sean, about conflict with your mentor or anyone, you know, within that lab or group is something all of us confront. I think though most of us always have the best intention, a red flag as a mentee is if you find a mentor that one is taking your ideas, disagreeing with you, and then doing something that may not be right. I think these are all real situations we've all dealt with. They're red flags. That is not the majority, but they are out there and you should pay attention to them. I think being honest to your work and integral to your work is always your guiding force and factor. At least for me, I know what I've done, what is mine. And a real good mentorship, and I'm fortunate I can say this, is when you have the real hard conversation, which I remember one day having with my own mentor saying, you're not going to be on this paper. I'm going to go last. And that's when you really have to step up, and a good mentor is going to say, it's yours, go. Now it's time. Right. That doesn't mean you never collaborate again, but that progress. But I think, you know, and when those situations happen, there's a group of us that have lived through, gone through, or know something about it. And so you just have to reach out. It won't take much for support. when you're ready to be a mentor, I don't even know. I think I first started taking on a med student and she wanted to do a survey study. And I was so gung-ho to do it. I was just all in and I loved every minute of it. And then that became a resident project, which became a PhD, a fellow project, which became PhD candidate, which became junior K awardees, right? It's a progress, but you just start. And I think you try to do something that's manageable, and a good mentor is going to tell you if you're taking on too much. They're going to say, back off, you can only do little. So small bites, but people will probably gravitate to you and want your help. And I think in little doses, it's good.
I'm going to build on that because I will modify my answer a little bit based on what Jill said. And I'll tell you what I was about to say and how it may be different with Jill. What I was about to say, well, the modification is it may depend who that person is. Because what I don't want to see is when you're young, you're trying to establish your productivity in your first authorship. And so taking a fellow who needs to do the same, or it's even you're 3 years out and taking someone who's 1 year out, right? I think there's a potential where if you're too close to needing to attain those same goals in productivity and being first author, you got to be careful, because you got to be careful that you're not sort of having that mentee sort of continue to propel your work, which is good, but you got to make sure you're propelling their work as well. Because they're on that same timeline. So I think it's possible that you could do it too early. And for me, it would be get a K, and that K to R transition. Maybe at that point you're ready, once you have your R, to train people who are in the physician scientist pipeline younger than you are, where then now you can shift where your authorship is and help them, grow their questions and be first author. Now you can get your feet wet with exactly what Jill said. You have a medical student, or you have a resident, and you want to spread your enthusiasm, right? You want to continue to build that pipeline of people going down that. So that's a different, I think, level of mentoring, and that's great. They can help you. You can share what science is all about and get them interested into sort of continuing that as a career down their pathway. But so I guess it depends who it is. But if they're on that physician scientist pathway, kind of close to you, be careful, because I think there may be potential conflicts of where the work divides out, and making sure you're being true to both of you.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think when you're a junior, you do have to be self-centered, for lack of a better word, in what you're doing. And it may be that you want to do a project because you're excited about it, as Jill described it, but more importantly, I would choose something that is going to build your career. And so you have some data that you just cannot get to. It's just not the most important data. Is there a student, a resident, a fellow who can take that data and run? And they're helping you, because it was going to take you a year to get that paper out, where they can do it in 3 months. So that's I would really make these mutually beneficial experiences. I would be incredibly careful if you find that working and mentoring them is starting to take you away from your focus, then that needs to stop, or you don't go down that path. And I would talk to your mentor. I'm very particular about what I want my mentees to do as far as mentoring, and they really have to show how that project is part of their career trajectory, part of their research. And then once they've got used to it, and they built their mentoring skills, then they run with it and are fantastic. But I've seen junior attendings really lose themselves in mentoring others, and it's sad when that happens, because I think with some protection to not do that there would have been an easier path towards a science career. And then just to your first question about when mentors aren't getting along, I mean, I think we've all had that paper or that grant that you have two people reviewing and they are saying the exact opposite, and they can even start to almost come to blows on your grant. And you're like, I'm the junior person, drowning in your argument here. So you end up, I had to do this. I had to pick one, and I had to let loose someone I really, really respected. And I was it was like I was 51% in one person's camp and 49 in the other. And I had to go with the 51 with my gut and say, I'm going to do, go with you. And I had to let the other person fall off my mentoring team because their disagreement was affecting my productivity. So I think you have to be self-centered. You have to make decisions for yourself and not be caught up in perhaps what the mentors going back and forth and their own ego that's involved in their work. So I guess that's my answer to both of them, is to stay very focused and centered. When you're junior, you will have time later to be more altruistic in science and academia.
Jim, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I think, I remember being early career faculty and I had a brilliant mentee, and I was excited to work with him. And I think he was interested in working with me. And I remember a very senior neonatologist who's an international legend was like, nope. And I remember being kind of disappointed. I thought maybe the qualifications weren't mine. That I had not done what I needed to do. But the fact of the matter is that this person was actually protecting me. And at the time I was unaware of that. You're coming through the ranks, you're trying to, have your own thing, and you want to feel like you're making progress. And that is a step on the ladder of progress to demonstrate that you're passing on some of the passion you have. But these are all very real. And if you put yourself into that investment and you really invest in them, then having a mentee is a responsibility and one I take really seriously. So when I say I'm in, then I'm in. I'm in on the weekend. I'm in on the holiday. I'm in for the project. And if you don't decide to do it, then I'm going to end up following through on it because I've already invested the time. And so, I try not to make that investment. And now, 15 years later, I recognize like, oh, that was really, I should have been more receptive to that. Inside, I was terribly grumpy, probably outside, but I didn't understand. So I would caution that. Would you, as a third-year fellow, take on a medical student? Yeah, I mean, they're only going to be there one day, probably anyway, right? Resident, sure. I mean, but at some point, when does the balance of what you're giving versus what you can learn from others around you and how you can advance yourself, not being selfish, but rather we could have had 7 more kids in our family, right? I mean, we have the resources, why not? And so it's kind of a joke. The point is that you just can tire yourself out having 57 different things, and you can be so much of something, you're nothing of anything. So it's really important to decide what it is that you're going to spend your time doing. And if you're an early career faculty and someone's laid a bunch of cash at your feet and said, go do something with this money, then, mentoring someone isn't at the top of that list. It's fun, and it should definitely be a part of what you're capable of doing, and it advances over time. I would be cautious, and just ask, hey, this person said that they would really like to work with me. What do you think about that? And if your mentor is, I don't think you should do that, then why? And if you don't have that open enough relationship to have that kind of a reasonable conversation, then reach out to me or somebody else on this panel. I mean, be happy to have a discussion with you about it. But I suspect your mentor will be able to tell you, here's the potential risk. I know it feels good. We all want to feel like we're helping. That's why we became doctors. And so I think it's really important.
I'll turn the word selfish into a positive word. You're being strategic. And that's what you have to think about. I know it feels like sometimes, if I say no all the time, or am I being selfish and I'm not mentoring? Because I think in general, we're all good people and we're going to think that first. No, you're just being strategic, which is important.
Yeah, I have an email that's a signature that just says no can do, right? And it is literally a signature. Thank you for writing. I'm overcommitted and cannot participate. Sincerely, Jim Wynn. And I don't have to think more than a few seconds before I go click, no can do. And the email is gone and it's off my desk. And there are times like that when someone's just asked you to do stuff that you can't do right now, or that you won't have time to do. And so just because someone asks you for that, I mean, I'm asking you for $50 right now. I mean, maybe you could just give me that. We have limits. We just don't have limits sometimes when we need to set them.
And Steve, any last thoughts on this?
I'll Venmo you the $50, Jim. No, I agree with what everybody has said. My only last thoughts are, when you're taking on a mentee, understand what their goal is, because that'll help guide you. So if you're going to have a resident come work with you, all the resident wants to do is to understand which end of the pipette to use and to maybe make a figure, right? So that's no big deal. That's not going to interfere with the stuff you're doing. If you're going to take on a fellow, you have to have a project that may interfere with what you're doing. That goes all the way up through. I didn't take a graduate student until I was sure I couldn't break a graduate student. So these are the things you have to think about as your mentee or as your mentor. And it's okay to say no. I agree with what everybody else said. If it's not going to work, be honest. The only last other thing that I'll say is that your needs for mentorship change and never end. So what I need for my own mentorship right now is different than what I needed 5-10 years ago, is different than what I needed when I started. I still need it, but it evolves and changes. And so sometimes you just need to find new mentors for the things that you need. If you're having a disagreement with your mentor, find different mentorship. That holds true if your mentor leaves. That holds true if something happens. Your mentor's a person too. They have life things happening. These things can occur. And so it's okay to search out new streams of mentorship.
No, that's great. Since we're talking about mentorship, I wonder if you guys could talk about the difference between mentorship and sponsorship and how that's evolved for you in your current roles, but also as mentees. Let's see, Sarah, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I'm so glad someone came up with this term sponsorship, because maybe I was just late to understanding it, but I realized once I heard it, how many sponsors I had in my career. And now as division chief, we've talked about that's a big role of your division chief, is you're sponsoring, where you really don't have the bandwidth to say mentor all of the fellows and everyone in your division, but you certainly can sponsor them. And so absolutely finding sponsors. And so sponsors are those people that are there, they're searching for opportunities in your career. They're thinking about you, they're prioritizing you, but they don't know the details of your research. They're not reading everything you're writing, but they have a general idea of your career and what are those next steps you need. They can give the 2-minute elevator talk on your research and tell someone else how great you are. And those are huge. And I don't know that you can have too many sponsors. I certainly haven't found that there needs to be a limit. And sometimes sponsors are going to ask you to do things that don't fit in your career. And we talk about saying no. We've already talked about this here. I just don't know. There's times that I wanted to say no, but now realize that was one of the best decisions I made. So it is so hard to do that. I think one thing I find is putting limits on things. So saying I'll do this for 2 years, or can I attend a meeting and see if this works for me? Could I talk to the chair of this committee and find out what's required? So really taking the time to find out what your sponsor wants to sign you up for, to make sure you know all the details. And then I'll just mention, I think Steve may have been, I'm assuming most of Steve's mentors now are peer mentors. And that's another area, that's another term that we've all had these people through the years, but now there's a term for it. And peer mentors are huge. So for you guys, other fellows, other junior faculty, for us, it's so many of us on this call where we're mentoring each other in different ways. I mentored for tons of people, on this discussion. So don't underestimate it. In fact, I have my faculty now putting peer mentors on their promotion materials, that we need to acknowledge how important it is to develop good peer mentoring skills. So just wanted to throw that in as well.
Jill, your thoughts on mentorship and sponsorship?
Yeah, I mean, Sarah's absolutely right. And I think one of the key drivers for me, or defining between the two, is really my sponsors have in so many ways been outside neonatology. I think that can lend itself easily when you're in basic science, for example, or you are conducting work that crosses beyond the clinical aspect into other fields. And it's wonderful to have people put you forward for something that will help with your growth and to challenge you, but they're not so involved in what you're doing. And they are so essential to your professional growth, your promotion. I mean, these are the people that really help to boost your CV with opportunities that you may not necessarily have been afforded without their support. And I would say you always need a sponsor too, or sponsors. Those are also people that, like mentors, regardless of the age or stage of your career, they're essential for a lot of reasons, not just for your professional growth, but for your personal, to challenge you in a different way. So once you get to be a full professor and once you have these things, you still want to be challenged professionally and be able to take on things that maybe you didn't think you could do, or grow your ideas in different ways. So I think they're extraordinarily important.
I would just add to that. It's so much of what we do, right, is about building relationships. And we talked about it with the mentor, and the same thing is with the sponsors. So someone, even though they may not know your science in detail, but they need to know in general, like what your goals are, what you would like to do, what are the opportunities that would benefit you. So take the time to build those relationships, keep them updated, have some coffee with them, just so that they know when those opportunities come up, they have your name ready, they know you would be interested in, and they offer your name as someone to consider for whatever opportunity. So it does take some time to build those relationships as well. Maybe not as much as for your mentor, but don't forget to really get people to know who you are. And I would say many of the opportunities that have come to me have been those individuals that I've spent the most goals and my ideals and what I would like to do. And so when opportunities came up, they threw out my name, which I'm always grateful for.
So I think of it in terms of an orchestra. My kid plays upright bass, so I kind of think in these ways. So your peer mentorship are the other people in the orchestra, right? They help you do what you want to do and make beautiful music. Your mentor is your conductor. He keeps you, or she keeps you in the right path, tells you what to play, when to play, how to play, and where to go. But it goes nowhere if you don't have somebody doing PR so people show up in the seats and listen to you. Those are the sponsors. So you have to have the whole picture in order to elevate what you're doing to a level where somebody's going to appreciate it, pay money, and hear you do your thing, which in the analogy form, that's getting NIH grants. So you have to have the whole package to be the most successful.
I think we're getting close to the end of our hour, so I just wanted to see if there are any more questions from the audience before we close, just to see if you guys have any other things that we could use this panel for.
I have maybe a quick question. Sorry, I'm Michael. I'm a second-year fellow in Colorado, but people tend to develop multiple mentorships. How would you all recommend coordinating those? How often does your mentee, or have you coordinated having everybody kind of in that same room, which is probably one of the hardest things in the world to do, but I do think is useful, but it's something I've really struggled with, especially when you think about having mentors across departments, and I think as time evolves across different institutions.
Yeah, I would just say, I don't know that all of your mentors have to come into the same room. I mean, we definitely have mentoring committees and they're pulled together and you're meeting with them as a group. And that it can be incredibly helpful. But on my K, I had different mentors who didn't necessarily, maybe I didn't know you were supposed to have them all come together, but it actually worked fine for me to share back and forth. This is what I'm doing in this person's lab. This is what I'm doing here, and bring it all together. Because I agree, it can be a little strange bringing people from different areas together. And a lot of us in science like to have control over things. And so it can be hard to share sometimes. So I don't know that they have to come all together and make one vision for you. I think you can meet with them individually and you then share with all of them, this is the vision that I have gained from working with all of you. Do you agree with this group? This progress.
Maybe if it happens to be a group of mentors that go to the same meetings, whether it's PAS or another meeting, because the discipline is in general the same, even though they might be approaching it in different ways. Sometimes you can use those opportunities, grab them. They've already blocked out their schedule. They're already there. Again, maybe a quick coffee, a lunch. That's another opportunity. So look for those opportunities while where you might all be in the same space.
The more the people on your committee are busy, further in advance, you have to plan it. So if you have a whole bunch of people that are very busy, you have to work harder to make it happen, and you got to think ahead and plan out. And so, you just have to keep that in mind. Doing things like this on Zoom work, but you can't wait to the last minute to do those kinds of things.
That's what I was going to say, Steve. I mean, people got medical student or med school letters, you coordinate things. You've been doing this for years. I don't understand. Like, it's not a challenge to just plan ahead. But I think it becomes a challenge when we don't. And then, you're right. Trying to get, if you look at this panel, just trying to get these people onto a 5 o'clock, Thursday night, June session, like there's no chance this would have happened spontaneously. And so it took planning. And so I think as long as you put this on the schedule, the worst case scenario is you show up and none of your experiments worked. And now you've got an hour that's blocked and you can actually talk about what you can do as an alternative strategy for the things that didn't work. But if you set those things ahead of time, you can get on calendars. But a lot of times people just don't. And when they don't, then you're right. It's really tough to get people in the room together. But I think you don't have to wait for the stars to align. You can align them with an Outlook calendar.
Yeah, most mentors want to do the right thing. They want to be there for you. So it's not trying to convince them to want to be there. It's just finding the time and helping them find the time to be there.
And that's the best part. Yeah, but it's the best part for us, especially when you succeed. There's nothing greater, honestly.
Yeah, it's so great to watch the mentees succeed, and that's our goal, really. And we are speaking of planning, and the next cafe, David's going to tell us when that is. If you have any questions, we're happy to answer them as well.
Sure. The next session is going to be at the end of September 28th. Betsy Crouch, who's another member of this organizing group, has put together a great panel where we're going to be focusing on negotiating a physician scientist contract and making the leap from fellowship to a tenure track physician scientist position. So the goal is really to think about, how do you take what you've learned during your fellowship and then begin to, sell it? How do you sell yourself so that you are attractive to division chiefs who are hiring new faculty, and, really put your best foot forward, but also aren't making compromises that are going to make it, impossible for you to be successful. I think that is the fine line that people feel like they're treading when they're trying to see what people are looking for and meet those objectives, but also be realistic about what it's going to take for you to be a successful physician scientist and junior faculty member. So please look out. We'll have some email announcements about this upcoming session, and we'll have another great panel to discuss this topic.
It's great. Any other last minute questions before we thank our amazing panelists? All right. Well, we're always available if you need anything or need additional mentorship outside of these physician scientist cafes. But thank you so much to our amazing panelists, and we appreciate all of your insights and are very happy that you took the time out and to do this. So we appreciate it. Thank you so much.
This was
Be-
recorded and it'll be available. Do you know where people should look for it, or how do we?
I will upload it along with a couple other videos to the ONTPD YouTube channel. And I think that if I'll try to coordinate with Betsy to get it on the TCAN channel as well. TCAN gets a lot more volume than the old fogies at ONTPD. But I think actually my reflection as a program director and a non-physician scientist was like, wow, as a program director, I learned a lot of things I should or shouldn't do. So it was super helpful for me. And I actually may reach out to this group about maybe having the physician scientists come talk to the program directors to kind of give us an introduction on like, how do we do this better? Because I think that we're often the lubrication in the process to kind of make this work better. And I thought, man, I learned a lot of stuff here. So thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Patrick. Appreciate it. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
David, I will make a link for September 28th, 2 p.m. If you and Betsy want to like stick the registration link into that flyer,
Okay.
I will start spamming ONTPD, TCAN, and I'm kind of keeping a list of registration, people who registered for any of the past things and making a master list. So I send it out to that group of people as well, so we can kind of get rolling on registration earlier rather than later.
That's perfect. Is there a good way to share documents? That was a good idea that if we generate material, like we should try to share it.
ONTPD has a Dropbox. Unfortunately, I'm also the IT person for ONTPD. So I'm like 6 videos behind that I've got to edit and put up and stuff like that. And so at some point it is publicly available. It just is a bandwidth issue. But I think that if you gather them, I will stick them in there and provide a link.
Okay.
It just may not be a day or two, maybe a week or two.
Does that go to all, it goes to all the PDs, but does it also go to all the fellows or no?
Yeah, so actually ONTPD's got a pretty robust system at this point. So it goes to every PD, every associate program director. I send it out to TCAN, who 90% passes it on to their 5,000 people membership.
Okay.
Then actually the real key is there's now ONTPC, which is the program coordinators.
Yeah.
And they're actually the ones that are watching them getting it out to the fellows better than we are.
Okay.
So we're trying to create kind of a nice network for getting information out.
Wonderful.
So once I upload this video, I will then push it out to TCAN, ONTPD, and ONTPC, so we can hopefully get some watches, because this was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Appreciate it. Thanks,
Great to
David.
see you.
as
Sure.
always.
Likewise.
Okay.